Hello, my lovely, and welcome to my home, Higher Self Tarot. If you are new here, my name's Addison Taylor. I'm so glad that you clicked on this video and gave me a chance. I hope you will be encouraged to subscribe. Afterwards, I do post weekly, and I don't just do astrology topics. I do spirituality, I do tarot, I cover it all. I try to mix it up. If you are a returning subscriber, then you know how much I love you, and it's so wonderful to see your face back in my home. Today's video I'm really excited about because one of the main reasons I love astrology is because it helps me understand other people in my life at a subconscious level. It helps me kind of get into their head, get into their psyche, understand the pain that is in their past, any insecurities that they have, and it helps me navigate our relationship, helps me improve our relationship, especially in romantic relationships, especially in my marriage. This has been hugely important, incredibly helpful, and I want to help share what I learned with you in the hopes that you can improve your own relationships. So today's video topic is going to be about Juno and where it is in your partner's chart and what that means. What do they need from their partner? So Juno in a man's chart or in a more divine masculine person's chart represents what they need from their divine feminine counterpart, what they need from their spouse, their wife, especially for a marriage or a long-term relationship or a relationship that's going to stand the test of time. What do they need? Because obviously what they need from that sort of relationship is going to be very different from what they need initially or what they need in a more sort of short-term situation or a fling. So if we want our relationship to really last forever, studying this is an important component of that. So we're going to look at both the sign that it's in and the house that it's in. So you'll want to have your partner's birth chart pulled up before you get into the timestamps of the video. Now, if you don't have the birth time, that's okay. You won't be able to see what house their Juno is in, but you can still see what sign it's in. All you need for that is just their birth date and year, and that's it. So I'm really excited to get into this with you, and I hope that you leave some comments down below. Let me know kind of what made sense or what was eye-opening, what you never realized before about your partner's placement, and kind of what changes you think you're going to make moving forward. Maybe you're going to have a deeper understanding of them or more empathy towards them. That's kind of what I hope this video can bring, kind of, improve relationships and bring the two of you closer together in a more cohesive sort of unit. Now, if you consider yourself to be the divine masculine counterpart in your relationship, or the husband or the male, however you refer, then this video will still be very useful for you because it's going to give you a deeper understanding of what you need in terms of a long-term relationship. One of the surprising things that I discovered about astrology is that so much of what we need is buried into our subconscious, to where we can consistently make the same relationship mistakes or relationship decisions, choose the wrong person over and over and over again because we're not fully aware of what we actually need in a partner. And studying our own chart and our own astrology can really help bring what's in the darkness up to the light, bring what's in the subconscious to the conscious so that we can make smarter decisions moving forward and decisions that are more fulfilling and healthier for us. So don't feel afraid to, keep listening to this video, learn more about yourself, so that way you can be more aware of your needs in a long-term relationship or a marriage. All right, with all of that being said, let's get into the signs and the houses of your partner's Juno. Timestamps for everything will be down below. Okay, if your spouse's Juno is in the sign of Aries, Aries is a fire sign. So this means that from their spouse, they need someone who is a doer, they need someone who is a self-starter, and they need someone who is assertive. That's going to be for any fire sign. That's that fiery, passionate sort of energy. But more specifically, to get into Aries, they need a spouse who is very straightforward, very direct, a spouse that really respects and enjoys their own independence, someone that's not too overly dependent on others in terms of decision-making or how they live their day-to-day life. They want a partner who's very active, who's very busy, who's very go, go, go. And they want a partner with a very strong and healthy sense of self, a strong sense of who they are, what they represent, who they are, on their own, outside of their involvement with everyone and everything else. And they definitely would prefer a partner who's a little bit more self-focused, and not and who they don't have to be super responsible for. If your partner has their Juno and Aries, this probably means that they want to be the person in the marriage that's a little bit more on the sidelines, or that can follow your lead a bit more. That feels more comfortable and natural to them. So definitely, like, aggressive is better than shy in terms of them looking at you as, marriage material, wifey material, whatever it is. And they want a partner who's definitely, more competitive, has a competitive nature in them. And yeah, someone who expects, each partner to carry their own weight in the relationship, not a whole lot of like codependency between the two. So in order to know kind of what area of life this is going to be most important to express this Aries energy in, take a listen to the house that their Juno is in. That'll help you better link these two energies together. Okay, if your partner's Juno is in the sign of Taurus, Taurus is a very earthy energy. It's a feminine energy. So in general, your partner's going to need someone who is a creator, someone who is much more creative, someone who's very anchored, has a slower pace of movement, and someone who's also receptive, a receptive and open partner. Now, Taurus is about our value system. So it's going to be extremely important for this particular partner to have someone that shares their value system. Now, sometimes in relationships, two total opposites can get together, two people from different religions, different political views, different whatever. But if your partner has their Juno in Taurus, this wouldn't be the case for them. Their values are very important to them, and they want someone that's on the same page as them with all of that. They also want someone who takes very good care of the things that they own, places a lot of value and care on, their money and their home and their car, and, all the things that are kind of considered their umbrella of possessions. They love to have a partner that they know is going to nurture and take care of those things, that won't be sloppy with the kind of responsibilities that are under their control, and that will really, allow things to stand the test of time. They want someone who's very committed to their choices. Once they choose that they're going to purchase something, it's theirs, forever. They're going to take care of it and make sure it lasts. Once they choose they're going to commit to a relationship, they're committed. They're in it for the long haul. So they want someone that really commits and is very focused on stability in their life. Slow, steady movement, not someone who can change at the drop of a hat. They want to be married to the same person today that they are 40 years from now. They want someone who's very consistently the same and very predictable. Taurus is also about our physical pleasures and enjoyment of those physical pleasures, and Taurus likes the finer things in life. It's not an overspender. Taurus is frugal and smart with their money, which is probably something else that's important to them. But when they do spend money, they don't spend it frivolously. They spend it on high quality items. They want to have the nice house. They want to have the nice furniture. They want their home to feel beautiful and pleasurable. And so whatever area or house of your partner's chart their Juno is in, that's where they're going to want this beauty and pleasure sort of expressed in their life. They probably even enjoy someone who is can be a bit jealous or a bit possessive with them. That would probably make them feel quite good, with their Juno being in Taurus, because Taurus can be, jealous. If they're noticing someone else is looking at their person, they're going to say something, they're not going to like it. And so that would be just another kind of small personality aspect that they might really like in a spouse. If your spouse's Juno is in Gemini, Gemini is an air sign, it is mutable, and it is masculine. So overall, the energy that they want from a spouse is someone who is a thinker, someone who is adaptable, and someone who is assertive. But more specifically, they want a spouse that really enjoys new learning experiences, really enjoys things like road trips, hobbies, kind of studying and into things, gathering information on things. They want someone who's smart and who's knowledgeable and who's good with small talk and can carry the conversation in any room or with them, and always kind of has a new spin to things, a new way to think about things, that can kind of see both sides of everything. along with this very sort of adaptable, mutable energy, they need a spouse who can forgive easily and doesn't hold on to grudges. They want someone who can kind of move and adapt and flow along with life and it isn't really stuck or rooted in the past, but thinking more about the new things they can bring in. They probably want someone who's a bit more social or a bit more outgoing, maybe that enjoys having several different hobbies at all times, and also a spouse that can keep them connected to their own community, their siblings and kind of what's going on in the local community and kind of checking out the new restaurants that pop up or the new museums or going on those little road trips. Like they want someone who can bring a very childlike energy and presence to their marriage. That's important to them. It's what they need. Definitely someone who's lighthearted, maybe even a bit of a flirt. They would enjoy that in a spouse. That would not be something that bothered them, kind of being with someone that has a bit of a flirty personality just naturally, it comes naturally to them. But definitely a spouse that's open-minded and up for changes. Okay, if your spouse's Juno is in Cancer, Cancer is a water sign, it's a cardinal sign, and it's a feminine sign. So overall in the energy, they want a spouse who's definitely a feeler, but someone who's a self-starter, who's ready to get things going, and also someone who is receptive, okay? So Cancer is all about that motherly role. So your partner really needs a spouse who's very motherly, very nurturing, very protective, just like a mother is with her children. Someone who's a bit more private, and maybe even a bit more introverted, they would prefer. Someone who's a bit more introverted, more private, maybe a bit of a homebody would even feel comfortable to them, but definitely intuitive to the needs of others, where you don't have to just spell things out. They want to take care, they want to nurture, they can tell when you're feeling a little bit off, and they want to be there and do something about it and help take care of them in that way. They probably want a spouse who's interested in having kids because Cancer is the sign of the mother, but if it's not about kids, then it's a spouse that they can look to as kind of the mother of the family or who takes on that motherly role. Also, perhaps a spouse who becomes very connected to their own family. If they're close with their family and their parents, they want a spouse who becomes just as close, accepts their family as their own as well, fits in. But Cancer is a very emotionally wise sign. It's kind of like the, psychologist in a way. They would probably even like someone who can cook really well or enjoys like a good movie and snuggle, like a very snuggly sort of energy, a gentle, soft-spoken sort of energy, and maybe even someone who's a bit emotionally codependent on others. Like if they may need a spouse that is like, if I'm not okay, my spouse also isn't okay, and we're emotionally in this together and we work through things together. And when I'm in a good place and feeling good, it makes my spouse feel good. So that kind of sort of emotional dependency on one another is important to them as well. If your spouse's Juno is in Leo, Leo is a fire sign, it's fixed, and it is masculine. So overall, the energy of their spouse needs to be that of a doer, a person who's very anchored and assertive as well. So kind of all three of these things. But to get into it more specifically, Leo is the sign of the inner child. So they want a spouse who's very playful, very joyful, very expressive. They want a spouse who is the center of attention in any room and can make them kind of the center of attention in any room as well. They want someone who adores and showers them with affection and love just as much as they give that back to their own spouse. So someone who can kind of like stroke their ego a bit, someone with a strong sense of pride, that doesn't let people walk all over them, that truly believes in their own royalty, their own sort of crown, and kind of lives their life as a queen or a king in a way. But Leo is also very generous, very warm-hearted. Leo is the king that really rules their country with a sense of pride and a sense of deep love and generosity for their constituents. So your spouse is really going to like someone that values generosity and is very warm-hearted, also values self-love and knows how to give themselves love and therefore confidently give that out to others. They want a spouse who really knows their own strengths and banks on those strengths and moves forward in life with those strengths. And they even would not mind a spouse that could be described as a bit dramatic or has a dramatic flair to them, and definitely someone who wants to lead a spoiled life, wants to lead that spoiled, cushy life that every king and queen deserves type of energy is what they need from a spouse. If your spouse's Juno is in Virgo, Virgo is an earth sign. It's also a mutable sign, and it is a feminine sign. So overall in the energy, they need a spouse who is a creator, who creates, who is adaptable and able to make changes easily, and who is also receptive and open to others. So to get more into the specifics of Virgo, they want and need a spouse who is very organized in their day-to-day life, who maybe others would describe as a bit of a perfectionist, maybe even a clean freak or a bit OCD. They would enjoy that from a spouse, and who lives a life of duty and discipline and service to others. Focuses on kind of the facts and the details, someone who is very practical, who kind of takes in data and then uses it in order to fix and correct things and make things better. They want someone who is very smart. They also value a spouse who is, healthy and values the body and health. They want a spouse that really places a lot of emphasis on making things make sense in life. What makes sense, and let's do it. It doesn't matter if it's fun or if it's hard, but if it needs to be done, let's do it, and really lives that life of service. And they probably want someone who is very choosy about who they decide to date, who they decide to be with, really any sort of major choice in life. They want a spouse who doesn't just go with the gut or doesn't just switch their decision, but really carefully looks at everything, soaks in all the details, soaks in all the information, and then helps move things forward. And someone who plans, a planner, someone who's humble, someone who is a realist, looks at things very realistically, not an idealist, and someone who is even a bit skeptical or even a bit critical. They need that from a spouse so that they can trust in kind of the direction that their spouse takes them, or wherever it takes their marriage or their lives. They want someone with that sort of analytical, skeptical, smart, very practical sort of mind. If your spouse's Juno is in Libra, Libra is an air sign, it is a cardinal sign, and it's a masculine sign. So overall in the energy, they want a spouse who is a thinker, who is a self-starter, and who is assertive. But to get more specifically into kind of Libra and what it represents, they need a spouse who is a very balanced and logical sort of thinker, a spouse who's less focused on the emotions and more focused on the data and the mind, and kind of emotionally detaching in order to assess. And this would make their spouse a very good decision maker, who values fairness, values equality, values justice. They want a spouse that really, really upholds those values in their life and makes decisions based on, fairness, equality, and justice. Libra also wants harmony and beauty in everything that they do, in all aspects. They want their relationships to be harmonious. They want their home to be harmonious. They want, things to be balanced and beautiful. And so that's important to someone with a Juno in Libra. They also need a spouse who will help them in their own one-on-one relationships. Libra is about being able to compromise and deepen our relationships with others. So they need a spouse that's able to assess and help them deepen their own significant one-on-one relationships in their life, whether that be with a sibling or with a parent or with their kids or their coworkers. And they need a spouse who can see both sides of a situation objectively and look at it that way, not someone who gets sucked into, doing anything and everything for the person that they love, even if it goes against their own values or ethics. They want someone with a strong ethical code. That is the type of spouse that if where they can say, if my spouse is saying that they're on my side, I know I can trust that and believe that. I can trust and believe that I must be right in this situation, because I know that my spouse really values assessing both sides and compromise and objective thinking. They also want a spouse overall who is more mental than emotional, someone who's more of a thinker than a feeler with a Juno in Libra. And they want a spouse who knows how to be liked by others. Libra knows what it needs to give to others in order to be liked, in order to be viewed in a positive way. So they want someone who knows what's appropriate socially in any situation, and how to really kind of finesse and ease their way through life and through their relationships. So all these sort of things are going to be important to someone with a Juno in Libra. Okay, if your spouse has their Juno in Scorpio, this is what they're going to need from their partner. I love getting into Scorpio, especially in terms of relationships, because it is such a deep, intimate sort of sign. And that's what your partner's going to need from you to feel secure in their relationship. So Scorpio is a water sign. It's also a fixed sign, and it's a feminine sign, actually. So overall, in the energy from their spouse, they need someone who is a feeler, but someone who's very anchored and someone who is very receptive. And so to get more specifically into kind of Scorpio and what this represents, they need a spouse who really values power, who feels powerful in their own life and has no fear of using power and their own self-empowerment to move and navigate through life. They need someone who really knows how to manipulate their way through things, who can kind of see the chess pieces on the board and know where everyone's going to move at any time and knows how to get there quicker, knows how to manipulate and moves in a very secretive sort of way. They need someone who values secrecy, who can keep their secrets, who can keep their relationship private, who can keep their mistakes and their faults and their wrongdoings, whatever it is, keep it between the two of them, and protects their partner in that way. Like with the Juno and Scorpio, they want to be intimate enough with their partner where their partner can see all sides of them, even the worst sides of them. And they want to see their partner's worst sides as well. But they want that to be kept between the two of them, where when they go out into the world, they're showing a very strong, united, formidable front to others. They also want a spouse who is willing to avenge them. They want a spouse who is going to maybe seek revenge on others when they are done wrong. Or, even if you're not actually going to do it, they want that spouse that's kind of always on their side of things. Like, yeah, how dare that person do that to you? I can't believe that. And isn't even so much concerned about the ethics of the situation like a Juno and Libra would be. Juno and Scorpio is like, no, even if I murder someone, I want to know that at least my spouse is going to be there to help me bury the body. That's kind of the energy of the Juno and Scorpio, like love to no end type of thing, protection to no end, and kind of being like partners in crime in a sense through life. They want a partner who they view as kind of the rising phoenix, someone who is really not scared of life, someone who is not scared of dying and transforming and being reborn over and over and over again, a spouse who can really be in the depths of despair and the worst of situations where life has maybe just completely raining and pouring down on them, but their spouse knows how to pick themselves up from that and move forward because their spouse feels powerful and uses their power to keep moving forward in life. They need a spouse who's very emotionally deep and emotionally complex. They don't want a spouse that only has like the positive emotions, or they don't want a spouse who is too cool to feel their emotions. They're not afraid to see their spouse's angry side or their manipulative side or their broken sides. They want to see all of it because they want to be able to relate to their spouse in that way. Like, we're both perfectly imperfect and I want to see all of you. They also want a spouse who could maybe be a bit obsessive with them. They want that obsession in their relationship where, that ride or die type of feeling for one another. And they need a spouse who's very smart and calculating though as well, who's intuitive with other people, who kind of can see where things are going and makes moves in a very wise, secretive, calculated sort of manner in order to keep pushing forward. So yeah, if your partner's Juno is in Scorpio, I think a positive side to this is there is this sort of feeling that you will, as long as you remain loyal to your spouse, they're going to be loyal to you to the end, and you're going to be kind of partners in crime through life together. Or that's at least what they want in a partner, and they would be willing to give that to their partner as well. Okay, if your partner's Juno is in Sagittarius, Sagittarius is a fire sign. It's also mutable and it's masculine. So overall, in the energy from a partner, they need someone who is a doer, someone who is adaptable, and someone who is assertive. But to get more specifically into Sagittarius and its energy, they want a partner that values travel and experiences and freedom. They want a spouse that values philosophy or sort of higher thinking, maybe even religion could fall into this, or teaching others, like a spouse who's kind of a professor in many ways because they've just gathered so much knowledge and they kind of have this higher view of thinking that can bring, that they can learn from and that they can teach others in as well. They want a spouse who is very optimistic, and a spouse that wants to always be evolving, someone that's always focused on the truth and higher knowledge and higher power and evolving towards that. They want a spouse who is very uplifting, maybe someone who they could describe as like an explorer, or someone who's very world cultured and open-minded. They also want a spouse who's very honest. Sagittarius can be extremely blunt, and if your partner has their Juno in Sagittarius, they prefer someone who is like harshly blunt over someone who is just focused on flattery and making everyone and everything feel good. No, they want that honesty, they want that truth, and they want someone who is always wanting to expand and grow, and someone who's a big picture thinker. They need a spouse who helps pull them out of the mundane details, pulls them out of the overthinking and the anxiety, and can kind of lift them up in the sky and say, see, look, here's the big picture. Everything's okay. Everything's great. Everything's fine. They need someone to help them with that and can serve that sort of purpose in their marriage of the big picture, and just let's experience life together and sort of like this wise sort of sage through life. All right, if your partner's Juno is in Capricorn, here's what they're going to need from you. So Capricorn is an earth sign, it's a cardinal sign, and it is a feminine sign, actually. So overall in the energy from a spouse, they need someone who is a creator, who creates, someone who is a self-starter, and someone who is receptive to others and receptive to life and information, things like that. So Capricorn is a very dependable, reliable, goal-oriented sort of sign. It's a sign that's very simple and very stern. And so your partner's going to need this from you or from their spouse. They need someone who's very goal-oriented, stern, someone who's very consistent, someone who's very conservative, traditional, structured, even restrictive. They would prefer a spouse who kind of keeps a lack mindset just in order to get ahead, who restricts the spending or restricts kind of everything, is okay with going without for the sake of getting ahead, for the sake of, well, we're not going to eat out all year long, but it's because by the end of this year, I want to have $3,000 in the savings account. That's the type of energy they want. Someone who kind of saves, a spouse who's okay with suffering in order for the end game, like is totally fine with pushing through and suffering through because they know that they're trying to head towards something. They're trying to head towards a goal, so the suffering is needed in order to get there. In terms of parenting, if they're interested in kids or you all have kids together, they want you to serve as the very strict parent, the parent that is no nonsense, the parent that is really able to endure what life or what the kids or what the finances or the job puts them through, that is able to endure that and just keep going. They want a spouse that they can describe as my rock. My spouse is my rock. My spouse is unbelievably strong, is able to push through everything, is very disciplined, very determined. They don't want a spouse that overspends or is very lavish or extravagant. They prefer someone who's more conservative, more traditional, more kind of tough-minded. And yeah, they would definitely prefer a spouse that is going to like save money versus spend money and serve that sort of role in the marriage. All right, if your spouse's Juno is in Aquarius, here's what they're going to need from you. Now, Aquarius is an air sign. It's also a fixed sign, and it is masculine. So overall in the energy, they need a spouse who is a thinker, a spouse that is very anchored in what they say and what they do and what they believe, and a spouse who's very assertive. And that's how they operate and move through life. Now, with Aquarius energy, Aquarius is a very progressive. It's a very progressive sort of thinker, a very sort of out there, kind of a wacky sort of energy, but for the purposes of they're kind of very forward thinking about the future. Aquarius is also very kind of unique, extremely authentic, and maybe sometimes is even described as a bit weird by others. So your partner really needs a spouse that is the same person to everyone. A spouse that doesn't have a mask for others. Like they are what they are. It is what it is. It's impossible for my spouse to change for anybody. They're just very much what they are, and they're uniquely them, and they own it, whatever it is. They also need a spouse who's very emotionally detached, a spouse that does not make decisions based on emotions, that does not drown in their own emotions, and that maybe doesn't even have very many emotions, because Aquarius is just a very emotionally detached sign. It's all kind of mental energy and in the head, and so they need that from a spouse, someone who's less emotional. They would even prefer a spouse that could be described as like cold and distant versus a spouse that would be described as dramatic and turbulently emotional. They want a spouse who really is 100% logic and a very sort of scientific mind. But also, Aquarius is ruled by Saturn. It's a very strong sign, and it's always kind of thinking about how it can progress things and move things forward. With a Juno and Aquarius, your partner may be attracted to someone who is interested in worldly topics like global warming or food crisis, or, whatever's, going on in the world. Someone who's interested in that. But Aquarius is also, a leader. I think the most common sun sign for United States presidents is Aquarius. So it's very progressive and about leadership and moving things forward. Aquarius is not afraid to stand up for what it believes in and to do what it thinks needs to be done, regardless of how it feels about it, but just based on, well, this is what makes sense. And I don't care if people think I'm weird for it. This is what I'm going to do because it's the right thing to do. So Aquarius can kind of be a martyr sometimes in that sort of sense. They don't want a spouse that's much of like a crier, like I was saying. They want a spouse that is a good decision maker and has a sort of genius quality to them. And Aquarius is also the sign of the friend and friendship groups. So they definitely need a spouse that they can relate to like they would a best friend, a spouse that they can talk to and hang out with just like they would a best friend. So Aquarius is not much about like romance and passion and that type of thing. Aquarius is like, your friendship group. They need a spouse that can feel like a friend, that can hang and chill with them, that they can open up with in ways that they would a friend, regardless of the fact that it's their spouse. Some people's relationships operate in the sense that, well, there's certain things I can share with my friends and that I can't share with my spouse. But for someone with a Juno and Aquarius, they want to share all the same things with a spouse that they would a friend. Like nothing's hidden, it's all out there. It is what it is. I am who I am. I can't change myself for anybody. And so what you see is what you get type of energy is what they need from a spouse. Okay, if your spouse's Juno is in Pisces, Pisces is a water sign, it's a mutable sign, and it's a feminine sign. So overall, from their partner, they need someone who is definitely a feeler and who's very adaptable and very receptive. Someone with their Juno in Pisces wants a spouse that's easily able to adapt to them. If their values change or something changes about them, the spouse is very easily and willing to kind of go along with that and change and transform with them. They can, transform together. So they need a spouse who isn't stuck on really anything. They need a spouse who doesn't have a whole lot of boundaries, but can very easily mold and transform into whatever they become, and they can kind of become that together. Pisces is also the wisest and most mature sign of the zodiac, so they need someone who's very emotionally mature and very wise. They need a spouse who's extremely compassionate and sensitive, and probably even someone who is more artistic minded and can show them the artistic side to life and the creative and spiritual side to life. They probably prefer a spouse who's a bit more shy or more of a loner or more introverted, more quiet, but definitely a spouse who is extremely accepting, and just very receptive to others. They need a spouse that can move and change with them. So when they decide to change something or move something, they know that their spouse is always going to be like, yeah, okay, that's fine. It makes sense. We can do that. A spouse that's more lenient and more relaxed and, just very, very emotionally sensitive, but very wise and mature about it and focused on the more spiritual side to life and the artistic and creative side to life. Okay, if your spouse's Juno is in the first house, take whatever you learned about the sign that it's in and apply that here, basically. So with a Juno in the first house, your spouse needs a partner that helps them to work out, that helps them learn how to lead in life, that allows them to lead a bit. They need a spouse that allows them to have that initial input and develop, his or her own identity. They need a spouse that will open up a doorway of focus to his or her perspectives and opinions, and really allowing those to take focus. They need a spouse that teaches him how to be a bit self-centered and self-indulgent, and to really assert themselves into the world. And they need a spouse that helps involve them in like physical or competitive sorts of activities. So through their spouse, they learn about their own identity because their spouse gives them the room to do so. So that's kind of the role that they need their spouse to help cultivate in their life. Who are they? What do they represent? How do their ideas matter? How can they present themselves to the world and be more assertive? That's kind of the role that you are kind of playing in their life, kind of opening up a space for them to do these things and doing small things that like encourage their own identity and development of their identity and who they are in the outside world. If your partner's Juno is in the second house, this means that from you, they need a spouse that really helps them cultivate their own self-esteem and their self-worth. They need a spouse that really points out their talents and helps them showcase their talents to the world, helps them develop new talents so that they can increase their self-worth and their confidence. They need a spouse that is very good at kind of taking care of their possessions, or teaches or shows them how to really care for their possessions, the items that they own, anything of value to them. They need a spouse that helps define their value system and stabilize it. And they need a spouse that is a great partner in terms of money and finance, maybe helps them increase their credit score or their savings account or just their overall net worth. They need a spouse that really helps stabilize their value in the world, both internally through their emotions and their confidence, and externally through, money, job, credit, talents, those sorts of things. Okay, if your spouse's Juno is in the third house, then your partner really needs a spouse that takes them on lots of short trips and learning experiences. They need a spouse that helps increase their speaking and their communication skills and helps foster that ability within them. They need a spouse that helps shift their perspective and awakens this curiosity to life within them. They need a spouse that helps them kind of speak about things and be curious and open-minded about things. They need a spouse that can teach them how to have better bargaining skills out in the world, better persuasion skills with others. They also need a spouse that really helps them mend or build their relationship with their siblings or out in their community. It would really be helpful for them to have a spouse that can be good about kind of running the little day-to-day errands and making the kind of day-to-day purchases, and is good at that type of thing as well. Okay, if your partner's Juno is in the fourth house, then your partner really needs a spouse who is a very private person, someone who helps them focus on building a home and a family of their own. They want a spouse that is interested in kind of the past and their roots and where they came from, and learning more about that, learning more about how who they are relates to where they came from, what parents they had, what grandparents they had. They want someone who can really be their family, be their mother, and it may even be important to have a spouse that shares a common sort of ancestry or upbringing with them, like where you both kind of had a similar upbringing. So through your union together, you learn more about your own selves through talking with one another. So someone who maybe had a similar parents or a similar sort of past as they did, and bonding through that and healing through that. And they also need a spouse who's not so concerned about the opinions of the world, but places more value on the opinions of the family and their private life. Someone who really is going to help them grow roots down into the earth and stabilize them emotionally through the sort of nurturing, mothering ability in the home life, in the private life, in the evenings, after work, the home that you come home to, the conversations you have, the family that you create. They need a spouse that can anchor them in that way. Okay, if your partner's Juno is in the fifth house, then they really need a partner who brings creativity and risk into their life. They need a partner who operates from the inner child sort of mentality, a very romantic and passionate sort of spouse, someone who brings performance into their lives and fun parties. They need a partner who puts joy, inner joy, above everything, and that really becomes the focus in the marriage. Is it joyful? Is it fun? Is it spontaneous? They need a spouse who kind of has like a blissful, childlike, and warm sort of persona and energy. And they need a spouse who can help awaken and sustain their passion for life, their creative purposes, a spouse that helps them create, a spouse that's not afraid to help push them to take some risks and maybe gamble on a few things in their life. A spouse that kind of has like a you only live once sort of mentality. We only live once, so let's just do it. That's what they really need in a marriage. Okay, if your partner's Juno is in the sixth house, then your partner needs a spouse who is constantly of service to them with all the little mundane daily things of life, all the little chores and little responsibilities. They need a spouse who they know they can count on for those sorts of things. They also want a spouse that is engaged with and helping them upkeep their own health, whether that be through diets and nutrition and exercise, doctor's appointments, things like that, because it will help free their own mind of these sort of worries, because they know that their spouse is there and supporting them through this and helping to take care of all these sort of day-to-day activities and responsibilities and health concerns and all of that. The boring details of life, they need a spouse that can help manage those things. They also probably need a spouse that can bring in like some small pets into the home, that the spouse can help be responsible for, but where they can also receive that nurturing and that emotional nourishment from, the small pets, whether it be, dogs or cats, things like that. And they also need a spouse that really dotes on them when they're sick. If something's going on with their health, they really need a spouse that can really, take care of them, take their temperature, make sure they take a bath, make sure they have a good meal, like they eat that type of stuff up. And they need a spouse that is very routine. They need a spouse that they just know they can count on for the day-to-day things that they would describe as a routine type of person that's of service to others or to the home or to day-to-day life, no matter how mundane or boring or detailed it can get. Okay, if your partner's Juno is in the seventh house, then they definitely need a spouse that highly values marriage, where that is really the focus. Like, not necessarily the home or even the parenting style or the jobs or the bills, but us. Like, how's the marriage doing? That's the focus. They also need a spouse who is an opposite counterpart to who they are. They want that sort of opposites attract in their own marriage, where everything that they're good at, their spouse is bad at. Everything their spouse is good at, they're bad at. And so they take each other's strengths. This falls under their responsibilities, this falls under their responsibilities, and that's how they operate. The two don't mingle in that sense. So someone who is good at all the things they aren't, and vice versa. They need a spouse who makes all the decisions with them. All the decisions need to be made equally. They need to be on the same page. They need a spouse who is willing to compromise and who really strives for equality, total equality in the marriage. They also need a spouse who is charming and alluring and knows how to attract others. Someone who is extremely self-aware and has a low, ego, and who is, very attractive, pretty. Someone who's not slobbish with the way they present themselves to the world. That's important to them in a partner. But overall, a partner who is just focused on the needs of both of them and not just their own needs, and is willing to look at things objectively and make decisions with them objectively and very much together. All right, if your partner's Juno is in the 8th house and they need someone who is very psychologically deep, a partner who's a great investigator, who is excellent with intimacy. They really need that intimacy with their partner, not just emotionally, but even with the finances. You know, all the resources are shared, everything is one. They need a partner who's very receptive and clever about life, and who knows how to kind of manipulate through life in order to pull and harness power from it. More money, more power, you know, whatever resources need to be gathered to move forward. They need a spouse who's very, very good at doing this, and knows how to, pull and suck the most out of life in order to move forward with it. They need a partner who is very, very good in these sort of crisis situations, whether that be a death in the family or, what's it called? Bankruptcy, job loss, like anything sort of major in life that would be defined as like a crisis or an opportunity for death and rebirth and transformation. They need a spouse who's very, very good at handling those sorts of situations. They also need a spouse who can provide them with some form of sexual liberation, like true sexual intimacy with another, like soulmate connection type of thing in the bedroom. And they need a spouse that they can trust enough to handle their most vulnerable moments with, someone they can really be vulnerable with, and they can trust the spouse to not only witness that, but take part in it and help protect them through it. So even with things like crafting out their will and their funeral, or dealing with other deaths in the family or any other crises that go on, they need a partner that is kind of good at managing those situations and moving through them together. If your partner has their Juno in the 9th house, then they really need a spouse who is constantly showing them the big picture, able to really pull them out of the details, suck them out of their anxiety, and show them like, hey, look, here's the big picture. This is the overall meaning to life. This is just one small detail in it, but kind of pull yourself back out of that. So a spouse who's very good at not focusing on the details and is able to pull their own head out of that energy when needed. They may need a spouse who is able to go on a lot of travel sort of experiences with them, a lot of foreign travel the world together. They maybe need a partner that is foreign or is from a different culture or a totally different background or ethnicity or race from them. You know, someone that really shows them like a totally new perspective on life in that way. And they need a spouse that they can gain a lot of wisdom from. They need to be with a spouse where they feel like they are the student and their spouse is just teaching and showing them so much that they never realized before, they met you. And they also need a spouse who follows the law, a spouse who's very honest, very truthful, doesn't try to scapegoat situations or do things behind other people's backs. Like they need someone who's very blunt and very honest and who places a lot of value on, the law or societal sorts of rules, or even like religion or spiritual ideals, a spouse who can really show them, like open the door to that part of life and what it means. Okay, if your partner's Juno is in the 10th house, then they really need a spouse who's very career oriented, a spouse who is very hardworking and considers themselves an achiever out in the world. They need a spouse who is very steady and very sort of boss-like, even fatherly, takes on this sort of disciplinary, strict, goal-oriented push towards life, and a spouse who can even pull them into the public eye a bit. Maybe through their spouse's career or their spouse's legacy, they get pulled into the public eye as well. It could just be through social media, for example. Maybe they need a spouse who's going to keep up with all that type of stuff, but they need a spouse who really helps them build and establish a legacy, something to be proud of in the outside world for others to see, and a spouse who helps set goals with them and achieve those goals, and a spouse who gives a lot of career support, career advice, who values their career as well, and they help push forward in their careers together through that sort of energy of this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to create, this is the legacy we're focused on, and receiving a lot of praise and recognition in the outside world due to those career objectives that their spouse helps them to achieve. Okay, if your spouse's Juno is in the 11th house, then your spouse really needs a partner that can help connect them to a network of people or different sort of friendship groups. They need a partner that really expands their social circle and the organizations they're a part of, and the groups of people that they're connected to. They also need a spouse who is maybe a bit political or a bit progressive, that wants to kind of achieve the ideal in life. They need a partner who can really be a friend at the end of the day, a deep friend at the root of all of it. That needs to be the root of their relationship, is kind of this deep friendship. And they need a partner who is ambitious and who is an idealist, a partner who has many big dreams and big kind of out there aspirations. And even if they're not achieved, or even if life brings in elements that can seem discouraging or make these sort of dreams or goals seem impossible, they need a partner that doesn't ever let that run them down. A partner that's always believing in the ideal and is always like, no, we can do this, we can do that. They need a partner that's always going to be dreaming with them about what can be accomplished and what can be done. And just a partner who's a great friend and who expands their own friendships and brings new people into their lives through that. Okay, if your partner has their Juno in the 12th house, then they need a spouse who is very sort of spiritual, or like without an ego, like a partner who's very much not focused on their own ego, and can kind of blend in with anything and anyone in any environment. They probably prefer someone who's more of an introvert, who really values alone time, private time. They need a partner who isn't super focused or obsessed with like money or like material sort of things, like it kind of gives me like hippie vibes, hippie sort of energy. They need a partner who is extremely, incredibly empathic, is able to feel what they're feeling, and can even be a great healer of their own subconscious and their own emotions and like that sort of energy. They may even need, depending on other things in their chart, they may even need a partner who has to be distant from them at times, where, maybe you guys can't always live together due to work or whatever's going on, but that partner's able to maintain that relationship even through that separation. They need a partner that they can trust even in moments of separation and isolation, that they know their partner is still fully committed, still has their back, and they need a partner who's just very relaxed, and just a very emotionally giving sort of person, and a partner who's just very creative and very easygoing and go with the flow, but overall more introverted and okay with separation or isolation or private time. A partner that's okay with each of you kind of having your own little private life outside of your relationship, and that's okay.